In the land of Enduka, a peaceful village surrounded by thick forests and a flowing river, there lived a brave young girl named Abigail. Abigail was unlike any other child in the village. She was curious, bold, and never afraid to explore. While other children stayed close to their parents, Abigail would climb trees, swim in the river, and listen to the elders' stories about the past. One sunny morning, Abigail sat by the river, watching the fish swim beneath the clear water. She loved the river, but she also knew its dangers. The elders often warned the children never to go too far because of the mysterious monster that was said to live in the deepest part of the river. No one had seen it for years, but its legend haunted the village. One day, as Abigail played near the river, she overheard two elders talking. They were worried because the river's water was becoming murky, and strange things had been happening. Fishermen had reported missing nets, and at night, eerie sounds could be heard coming from the water. "The river monster must be waking up," one elder said with a trembling voice. Abigail's heart raced. Could the monster really be back? She decided to keep a close watch on the river. She didn't want anything to happen to her village. The next evening, as Abigail sat quietly by the river, she saw something that made her gasp. A dark, shadowy figure moved beneath the water. It was large and fast. Before she could get a closer look, it disappeared. Abigail ran back to the village to tell her parents, but they didn't believe her. "It's probably just a big fish," her mother said. "You shouldn't scare people with stories." But Abigail knew what she had seen. She decided she would find out more on her own. The next day, Abigail went to visit Mama Ik, the oldest woman in the village. Mama Ik knew many ancient stories. Abigail hoped she could learn more about the river monster. "Oh, the river monster," Mama Ik said, her eyes growing wide. "Long ago, it terrorized our village. It would swallow boats, steal fish, and make the river unsafe. It took a brave warrior to drive it away. But if it has returned, we must be very careful." Abigail couldn't stop thinking about what Mama Ik had said. She knew she had to do something. But what could a young girl do against a powerful river monster? That night, as she lay in bed, an idea came to her. She would follow the monster and find out where it lived. If she could learn its weakness, maybe she could help the village defeat it. Early the next morning, Abigail packed some food and set off toward the river. She walked along the shore, keeping her eyes on the water. After some time, she heard a splash and saw the dark shadow again. This time, Abigail didn't run. She followed the shadow as it moved downstream. It led her to a part of the river she had never seen before, where the water was dark and deep. As Abigail hid behind a tree, the water suddenly erupted, and the river monster emerged. It was massive, with glistening scales, sharp teeth, and glowing red eyes. Abigail's heart pounded, but she didn't move. She watched as the monster let out a roar and dove back into the water. Abigail knew she had to warn the village, but she also knew they might not believe her. She needed proof. That night, Abigail told her best friend, Obi, about what she had seen. Obi's eyes widened in fear, but he agreed to help her. Together, they planned to return to the river the next day. They would bring a fishing net and try to capture something that would prove the monster was real. Abigail and Obi sneaked out early in the morning and set up their trap near the deep part of the river. They tied the net to a strong tree and waited. Hours passed, and just when they were about to give up, the water began to bubble. The monster was coming. The monster swam toward the net, and as it got closer, Abigail and Obi pulled with all their strength. The net tightened around the monster's tail, and it thrashed wildly. "We did it!" Obi shouted. But the monster was too strong. It broke free, and Abigail and Obi ran back to the village as fast as they could. Breathless and frightened, Abigail and Obi told the elders what had happened. This time, the villagers listened. They could see the fear in the children's eyes. The elders held a meeting to decide what to do. They knew they had to act quickly before the monster attacked the village. The villagers began preparing weapons and strengthening their boats. Abigail wanted to help, but the elders told her it was too dangerous. "You've done enough, Abigail. Leave the rest to us," they said. But Abigail wasn't ready to give up. That night, Abigail made a decision. She would face the monster herself. She knew the river better than anyone, and she had a plan. She packed her things and sneaked out of the house, determined to save her village. Abigail paddled a small canoe toward the deep part of the river. She wasn't afraid. She was determined. As she reached the dark water, she whispered a prayer and dropped a special bait into the river. It was made from herbs Mama Ik had given her. Suddenly, the water began to swirl, and the monster emerged. It roared angrily, but Abigail didn't flinch. She held up a shining stone that Mama Ik had given her. The monster paused, staring at the stone. The monster lunged at Abigail, but she was ready. She steered her canoe away and threw a net over its head. The monster thrashed, but the net held tight. "Leave my village alone," Abigail shouted. As the monster struggled, it suddenly stopped. Its eyes softened, and it began to speak. "I was cursed long ago," it said. "I was once a guardian of this river, but I was turned into a monster by an evil spell." Abigail was surprised. "How can we break the curse?" she asked. The monster told Abigail about an ancient spell that could break the curse. It involved using the shining stone and a special chant. Abigail listened carefully. She knew she had to get it right. Holding the shining stone, Abigail began to chant the ancient words. The river glowed, and the monster's body began to change. Slowly, its scales faded, and it transformed into a gentle, wise-looking creature. The monster was gone, and in its place stood the river's guardian. It bowed to Abigail and thanked her. "You have saved me and your village," it said. "I will protect Enduka forever." Abigail paddled back to the village, where the people were waiting anxiously. When they saw her, they cheered. Abigail told them what had happened, and they celebrated her bravery. The villagers held a big feast in Abigail's honor. They danced, sang, and thanked her for saving them. Even the elders praised her courage and wisdom. With the river monster gone, the village of Enduka became peaceful again. The fisherman could fish without fear, and the children could play by the river. Abigail was happy, but she knew she would never forget her adventure. Abigail learned that true bravery comes from doing what is right, even when you are afraid. She also learned that sometimes, monsters are just creatures in need of help. Her story became a legend in Enduka, and children grew up hearing about the fearless girl who saved the village. Abigail continued to explore, learn, and help others. She knew that challenges would come, but she was ready. She was Abigail, the fearless girl who battled the river monster and won. And she knew that with courage and kindness, anything was possible.